All right. Welcome to the March 20th, 2024 meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission. The Thurston County Planning Commission is a resident advisory board to the Board of County Commissioners on land use planning matters such as the comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, and amendments. Planning Commission actions are in the form of recommendations to the county commissioners, who are the final decision makers. All planning commissions meetings are open to the public, and community members are welcome to observe all planning commission briefings and work sessions. We welcome public comment on those topics for which a public hearing has not been held. My name is Derek Day and I serve as the commission chair. I reside in District 1, and we will continue our introductions here in the boardroom with Commissioner Hanson.
Joel Hanson, District 4.
Eric Casino, and I serve District 2 at large, but I live in the Lacey urban growth area.
Daniel Bumbarger, District 1.
Kevin Festinger, District 5.
Bill Fishburne, District 4.
Barry Halverson, District 2.
Scott Nelson, District 4.
All right, thank you. And nobody online. Okay. Let's see here. I would entertain a motion to approve our meeting minutes from March 6th.
Sir, would you like to mention Colin's status?
Oh, Colin will not be joining us, and I believe his absence would be excused. Record.
Agenda,
What's that?
agenda first.
Yeah, but oh yeah, the agenda. Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Actually, ask for discussion. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any nays? All right, motion passes. The agenda is approved. Okay, I would also entertain a motion, moving on, to approve the minutes and accept the audio as the official meeting record.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Okay,
Just a comment. The meeting minutes the last couple of times have been very good. Appreciate it.
okay, good work, Tasha. Okay, well, with that, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The minutes and the audio are accepted. All right, moving on to public communications. Is there anybody in the room who would like to provide public comment? And go ahead and tell us who you are and where you're from. Wait, sorry. You can go to the dais, I guess.
The whole room is a
I think it's
microphone.
more for microphone and stuff.
Up there,
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, my name's Betsy Norton. I live in Olympia up on Evergreen Park Drive. And I'm speaking on behalf of Black Hills Audubon Society Conservation Committee. This is regarding the ILS, which is going to be presented in the second half today. And we presented some comments to the Board of County Commissioners earlier in December. And then we had some additional comments coming through in February, but since a lot of people on the Planning Commission are new, I want to make sure we have a chance to see them all. So I just wanted briefly to say, we remain concerned that the ILS doesn't consider any environmental, climate, or habitat considerations when they make recommendations regarding how and where to use much of the rural lands. And as you'll see in the attached letters, and I'm gonna send this in, can I send them in from Andrew?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
To the BOCC from the Black Hills Audubon Society, the lack of environmental considerations results in a flawed recommendation for siting and policy changes, which threaten the endangered species, the coho salmon, and the health of the streams of the county. So the ILS also fails to fully address, and this has become clearer to us lately as we've done more investigation, that there are a lot of important water issues which impact all three of the ignored dimensions of environment, climate, and habitat. The water issues should be paramount in siting considerations in Thurston County for both people and wildlife. And since you guys make a lot of land use decisions, this is really salient. There's aquifer recharge considerations, groundwater level management. And we care about that because the groundwater levels affect the stream levels, which affect everything that depends on that. Also, water quality concerns, particularly stormwater runoff, near sensitive habitat that can take industrial pollutants and things from trucks and stuff. And then it also exacerbates the flooding. You expect to have more highs and more lows with climate change in the water levels. And the more impervious surface you have, the worse that gets. So in addition to the industrial land study, we recommend that you seek out other sources and other data which assess land use development and siting that fully considers the needs of the future residents of the county, the environment, climate change, and habitat conservation as you craft your fully considered and well-informed vision of the county for the 2045 comprehensive plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone online? You might want to, okay. All right, unless. Oh, does Loretta want to provide comment or no?
Her hand is not raised.
Okay. All right, well, with that, we will move along to new business for a work session on Thurston 2045.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm Leah Davis from Community Planning. Thank you for being here tonight. This is I drew the long straw, I'm pretty sure, because this will be the easiest chapter that you have to review in the Thurston 2045. I will share my screen and get started on a presentation. There we go. Okay, tonight we're going to look at chapter 1, the introduction to the comprehensive plan, and 3 appendices, A, C, and D. There is a B, that is the implementation plan, and that will be brought to you once we have it finished, which will include a lot of the other heavy chapters that we have to amend. So we'll have a look at chapter 1, the introduction, which is kind of the overview of the comprehensive plan. Appendix A is Thurston County history. And that includes Indigenous people all the way to present day. Appendix C is a very detailed description of related plan studies and regulations that inform the comprehensive plan. And then Appendix D is merely basically a chronological historical list of amendments that have been made to the comp plan. So we don't need a decision tonight as far as a recommendation to the board. What we'd like tonight are any suggested edits that you have to the documents that we're going to review, and then a thumbs up to move on. And that way we can set this chapter aside and move on to the work of the rest of the comp plan. And then we will bring it all together for a public hearing and one recommendation to the board that will encompass all chapters. So this is an update that's required by the Growth Management Act. It requires that we do an update every 10 years. It cycle for this also provides us an opportunity to look ahead into the future for 20 years to kind of estimate what economic growth will be doing, population and capacity, things like that. It also ensures that we are consistent with the Growth Management Act and all of the planning goals. This particular periodic update is not a full repeal and replacement of the existing comprehensive plan. It is also not a full revisioning, but as you know, there are a lot of state regulations that have changed that we will have to incorporate into this plan. This periodic update is must be adopted by December 31st of next year. So let's talk briefly about what a comprehensive plan is. It is a plan that is created with the community and based on state regulations to provide a vision for what the future looks like, where and how we build things. It also is guided by 15 planning principles or goals, and they are here. I don't need to read them to you. There are 2 new goals that have been added since the last update. Climate change and resiliency, and then a requirement to incorporate the shoreline master plan into the comp plan. The last periodic, yes,
Are these in any form of order, like importance or just randomly
Not at
put
all.
together?
no, they're not in any order of importance.
Because that first one, goodbye Lacey.
Yeah, it's a balancing statute.
The last periodic update we did was in 2019, and that update was based on data that was really reflected from 2016. So we're ready for an update. This is the project timeline so far. We did all of the scoping in 2022 and 2023 to what chapters we would be updating. We did a very extensive outreach, public outreach in the last year. As you probably know, we did an online survey and some open houses to get people engaged in what they want to see in this periodic update. And then in the next year, we will be doing the Planning Commission review of the chapters. And then, as I said before, we need to have this adopted by the end of 2025. So we'll start work sessions with the Board of County Commissioners early next year and be doing those throughout the year. Here is a tentative timeline of how we hope to get the chapters to the Planning Commission. March, April will be the Thurston 2045 survey results and comments that we've received. We will also be doing the historic resource chapter. And then May, capital facilities and utilities, environment and recreation. Early summer, housing, land use, natural resource lands, and then later in the summer, climate, transportation, and the implementation plan, which is Appendix B. And it has to be done last because it will encompass so many of those other pieces. This is tentative and subject to change, but we'll do our best to stick to it. So tonight we're looking at chapter 1, the introduction. And as I said, this is the easiest chapter by far to review. Some of the amendments that we made in the introduction includes 6 broad themes from the Thurston County Strategic Plan. You may have read those in the draft. Survey results, what community priorities are and what their vision for the county is. We've added the 2 new growth management goals. And then we have a lot of updated data in that chapter that includes the economic situation, demographics, and also updated weather patterns that might influence the climate and resiliency chapter. Appendix A is Thurston County history, probably the most interesting read in the whole plan for some people, maybe just for me. So we have amended it to have a more accurate and thorough history of the Squaxin Island people. It was provided by them. They did give us a nice narrative on their history. We've also changed the word Indian to Indigenous throughout that chapter. And then we also have a more accurate history of the early settler George Bush, which I thought was a pretty interesting story. And in Appendix C and Appendix D, let's see, description of plans, studies, and regulations. That's a very detailed description of all of the plans that help inform the comprehensive plan. We updated some references where applicable. And instead of directing people to find copies of these plans at the library, we deleted that and, and added links directly to the plans that we have stored online. And Appendix D is a chronological list, the updated amendments actually goes back to 1986. This time we've updated a plan that was adopted in 2019. And then we've added all of the Thurston 2045 updates will be added. And those dates will be included before adoption at the end of next year. And then just taking a look ahead from today. We will have the Historic Resources chapter on April 3rd. We'll bring that to you for review. And hopefully we'll have the climate chapter and housing chapter, the way we plan to approach the review of those. We won't be reviewing them yet. There's a lot of work left to do. So we're hoping to have that to you also on the 3rd. And then later in the month, hope to have a review of capital facilities and the utilities chapter. So if you go to the Thurston 2045 webpage, which is thurston2045.org, you can sign up for email updates, so you can get on the list of anytime something's coming before the Planning Commission or the Board of County Commissioners, you'll get an email talking about public hearings and other issues that come up. And you can also go there to make comments on the project. There's a Survey Monkey, some simple questions to ask about priorities and stuff for you and the rest of the community. Yes.
Sorry, can you go back one slide? I just want to make sure I'm clear about this because I know it's important to a lot of people. Chapter 10 is only about historic resources. Climate and housing approach are different chapters, but we're also going to cover those.
Just how we plan to approach the review of those chapters.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're big. It's a lot of change. And so we're going to talk about the approach. Would you like to speak to that, Ashley?
Yes, I think what we'll have ready by next meeting is a review of the land capacity analysis, like the methodologies that are gonna be used for that. And then we should have firm dates on our like bigger outreach events. But as we've talked about, we'd rather just give it to you in smaller bites. So as we have updates, bring them before you, let the community know that they're on the agenda if they want to kind of follow along as we're developing housing and climate work.
Thank you.
Those chapters don't have chapter numbers yet, is that correct?
The housing does, climate will be a new chapter number. If it would be helpful, we can start referring to them as chapters. I think housing and climate.
Oh,
would
housing
always
is
say
four,
housing and
but-
climate.
Yeah, just for clarity's sake.
Yeah, we can do that.
And that's everything that I have. We can have some discussion about the chapter.
Oh, just one thing I wanted to point out that I've noticed in a couple places, this still uses his or her a lot, or at least I've noticed it. Wondered if there was any attempt to revise it with gender neutral language.
Oh, could you tell me where you saw that?
So for instance, in the Thurston County population by age group, there's a paragraph that reads in 2045, a child born in 2025 will be in his or her 20s, entering the workforce, starting a family. Might be just a good to do a little control F and grab those easy edits.
Okay.
I will say, we have a plan to address a lot of like the small little things throughout the chapters.
It's a piddly
because
thing, I know, but it's
still a lot.
it's
There's a lot of
still-
changes.
We have a running list, and I think that's a good one to add it to the list, because there are different people working on different chapters and going through and doing that editing across the board. And so we'll make sure to add that to the list of things to identify throughout the chapters.
Yes.
Are we gonna spend any time on the appendices or especially appendix A, or is that something we would talk about here? Or?
Yeah, this is where we're talking about them, because tonight what we'd like is a thumbs up that if we make changes or edits that you suggest, then we get a thumbs up and put this chapter aside. Yes.
So appendix A is considered part of this?
Yes, yes.
ACND.
And that's the history, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that might be a while, but no, it's not right this minute.
Okay.
And I will say, oh, sorry. I didn't know if you were you. The Squaxin Island Tribe provided more detailed narrative that they wanted to have included. Just so you're aware, we also reached out to the Nisqually and Chehalis
Yes.
tribe and specifically asked, we shared the edits and asked if they wanted to add anything. So that's still open to receive. So if they provide that, we will definitely add it in there.
I was looking through the list of different programs and documents that
are listed in the appendix that are going to inform the comp plan. Often we run up against TRPs. You can purchase this from TRPC. A lot of regular citizens aren't going to want to purchase anything from TRPC, but I assume that the county will have copies of that available to the public to see. I mean, if the county is using it to inform the document, I imagine that would be available to us as well at no cost, or, and I know that in the emailed document you sent us, not all the hyperlinks are working right, and I'm sure that's just a formatting thing that will happen over time. But will you guys be able to bring some of that forward for us or make it accessible to the public?
I think I would say that probably everything that we can link online, we would do rather than have hard copies available for people.
That would, well, that's what I would prefer
Yeah.
anyways, is links online, but I don't want the link to be to TRPC, please enter your credit card number and then be able to.
Have you experienced that?
I have not. But
Okay,
just when I was reading through this stuff this last week, boy, if I wanted to access that TRPC report, that is informing Thurston 2045. It's telling me I need to go pay for it.
well, we would only have links to documents that are stored online that anyone can access with the link. I've never come across something that you can purchase from TRPC. I think because it's a public entity, they put all of their stuff online for public access. Am I wrong about that?
I've never, I don't know of any documents that you have to pay for, but if you run across one.
I just read it in the packet from, and it made reference to purchase from TRPC. I don't know if it's actually required. TRPC. Did you guys read the same thing when you're reading through the appendix, the list of plans and programs and it's available for purchase?
Well, and it may be true if someone wants a hard copy, they would have to purchase it, but I don't think there's any opportunity
Okay.
to purchase
So
something that's
there
online.
probably will be a hyperlink that's
Yes.
active by the time this plan goes
Or
live.
anything that's available online, yes.
Will that mostly be like a date cutoff for like older documents might only be in hard copy, or? Is it just kind
That's a
of,
good question. I don't know, TRPC's policy, probably when they have a new plan or a new study that's done to replace an old one, perhaps the old one isn't available anymore, but
We can follow up.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'll find
Yeah.
out.
I guess my basic concern is I don't want anything that's informing this plan to be behind the paywall.
No,
Right.
I think that's a
I
good
don't
point.
think anything is.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at appendix C, on page C 22. And I see section F, Olympia Airport, Olympia Airport Master Plan. And I would have thought that would have been under transportation, under section A. Does that mean, because we are covering transportation, but I've never seen anything and some of these other related ones, but I don't see anything about the Olympia Airport. Is that something we're not gonna delve into?
Well, we did adopt some changes when we did the Tumwater joint plan update. We did reconfigure the landing pattern zones for that. What's
That was when it was like 2.5 years ago, or that was
yeah,
recent, just recent?
2021.
Okay.
Yeah, and we updated the code to accommodate those changes for landing patterns.
Would the planning commission like to see the Olympia Airport reference under transportation rather than its own subsection? That's an easy change. I don't think there's.
Makes sense.
I would.
But I mean, if I was a general member of the public and I went looking for it, that's where I would look, I think.
I guess it depends why you're looking.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
Like, if you're looking because you want to know about the Port of Olympia, who operates
That
the
makes sense.
airport, it's gonna be different than planes.
No, but I would also
Yeah, I
like
think
to see where
the
that
airport
portion is.
Sort of more than its transportation function.
We add a reference to it in there?
That would
Just so
make
they,
sense.
so if you look there and you see it, then
Please
you at
find
least
it.
know to go to find it.
Yeah, and I have a question about that because there is an update of that airport master plan happening right now, and I think it's in review with the FCC or the FAA, sorry. But it'll probably, hopefully be done before this update is done. Would it then be?
To be reflected, yeah, I've made a few notes of that too, like the SMP it's in Department of Ecology review right now, but hopefully by the time the comp plan gets updated, so we'll make note of those ones that, you know, flood hazard mitigation plan falls in that category too, over the next 2 years. We're hopefully gonna get updates to those, so we'll make sure they line up. I'm wondering if the subsection F, it calls out Olympia Airport more like a transport, it's just a transport or serves a transportation function? What if it's more Port of Olympia? And then listing out other Port of Olympia plans,
That'd be
so
great.
that there's a distinction between its just the transportation function and the broader function that the port serves.
I think that makes a ton of sense. It would also help people understand that maybe like it's a different entity.
Yeah, are they entirely, they make their own decisions completely, or does the county have any input or say? You're saying we changed some stuff related to the Tumwater one. Sounds like the county has some say over parts of what the Port of Olympia does.
I would say not much. And we adopted what the city of Tumwater had adopted, and that's why we went that direction. And then we have an overlay zone that regulates what can be built in those areas for safety reasons, density and safety. So we have some say over the ground, but we don't have any say over the airport functions and so forth.
Sure.
I think the Port of Olympia in general it's a partner for economic development, and they definitely do more than just provide that transportation function. So in terms of like listing plans that could speak to our comp plan or vice versa, I think it makes sense. I mean, we definitely look at the planning that they're doing, especially as it relates to things like habitat conservation and their potential partner. So we might be adding a few things here if we call it Port of Olympia. It sounds like that's okay.
Anybody? Different opinion?
It's a good idea.
Okay.
I just have a comment that it's a little bit shocking that the most recent energy plan for the county is more than 40 years old.
That's not the energy code.
Is quite kind of a general question. I think, like, is this a repository of plans that have occurred, or is it just the latest ones? It's kind of nice to have that historical reference, but then verifying if there's a more recent one.
A lot has happened in 40 years.
And there have been intervening efforts. They might just not have made their way into like their own plan.
Sure.
Anything else? We have found this thoroughly non-controversial.
You still have good suggestions though, so.
So I'd like to reiterate the things that were suggested, and then if everyone's agreeable, we make those changes, and then we put this chapter aside until the end. So I just want to make sure everyone's on board with that. So in the data sets, change things to be gender neutral instead of he/she. Make sure that there are no paywalls for any documents through TRPC or any other place, and make sure the links are valid. Add airport under the transportation chapter, and maybe include more information in here if there is some historical information about the Port of Olympia and how that informed the comprehensive plan. Maybe check to see if there's something more recent than the 1981 and 83 energy plans. Did I capture everything?
Actually, I could. The demographic data on that same section I was referencing only highlights millennials and baby boomers. And it refers to millennials as just entering their prime working years. I've been in my prime working years for 15 years now. I feel like that, like maybe highlight alpha at least on there, or just color code all the generations so they can see how the color mix changes over time.
Did they forget about my generation?
The X's, the silent generation, the Xers, alpha, and the Zoomers, none of them are on there. It's just millennials and boomers were the only ones.
Yeah.
And maybe comment is that, You just don't know it, but you're about to enter your really prime.
Yeah.
You're gonna get really prime.
When you're 22, you're not in your prime working. Generally.
I have a quick discussion point, and I could go either way on this, but on page 1-2, the first bullet here, a healthy, natural and built environment, the last sentence of that paragraph, we are working to be resilient in the face of climate change and contribute to regional efforts to maintain a stable climate. I'd love to say that we're doing more than just contributing, that we might lead, that we might
Champion.
yes, something more, and I put that on the table for discussion.
That's the introduction, right?
Yes,
And where was that, Joel?
it's page 1-2, so right at the beginning of chapter 1. Top of the page, a healthy, natural and built environment. It's the last sentence of that paragraph. I mean, contribute's pretty vague, you know. Kind of like I gave at the office.
At the county and municipal level, that's about all you can do. Because the governance of our country is from the United States and the state. They're the ones that derive the policies. We don't really drive the policies. We implement the policies at the local level.
I think that there's a lot to be said about the local restrictions on development and how it can impact the environment. So I understand why we would want to think of it in those terms, but I do tend to lend credence to the argument that there's not a lot we could do to mitigate climate change, but there's a lot we can do to become resilient for it. And there's a lot we could do to keep from contributing to it, but we're already doing most of that.
Yeah.
But it would be good to see how we can become more and more resilient. I think that's where our focus would be better off. A lot of times we confuse climate change issues with pollution control issues. And I don't ever want to lose sight of pollution control issues, especially in our area where it seems to really rear its ugly head when it comes to water quality issues.
Stormwater specifically.
I didn't want to say that, but yeah.
So understanding that this is under the heading of like healthy, natural and built environment. Like, I think we talked about it a little bit, and there is an ability to, I think, for us to lead on built environment policy in a way that would maybe go a little bit beyond contribute, but thinking about leadership as like housing policy and development policy, that piece is making a contribution to maintaining the stable climate. It's not like we're having, we're not doing regulations on coal-fired power plants or something.
That whole last sentence is pretty passive voice. It could be rewritten to be like leverage our full suite of capabilities to whatever, That way we're saying we're doing everything we can without just saying we're contributing.
That was kind of my thinking. That yeah, we could take a little bit stronger tone.
Would we feel okay with staff taking a crack at that? Okay.
Set the stage for the new climate chapter.
Yeah, there you go.
On the county history, in addition to what Ashley mentioned, that working with getting more possible updates from tribes, just from your review of it, where do you feel the most concern for potential need for changes?
To amend this?
Yeah, for the history.
Well, I do think that if the other tribes want to contribute, I think that would make a huge difference because it's very heavy on post-indigenous occupation. Or, you know, European occupation. It goes into great detail about the settlement of a lot of small towns. Most of the small towns around and the economic development throughout history there. How the towns were named. I think more contribution from the tribes would be beneficial. It would balance it out a little more.
I do as well. The first thing I looked for in here was the story about Chief Lesha, who was the chief of the Nisqually tribe, who was murdered in the governor's mansion. That's a pretty big story.
Yeah.
It's not in here. It happened in 1855, I think. And I mean, I've literally heard Billy Frank tell the story, Billy Frank Jr. tell the story. And it's pretty moving. So that might be open for consideration, even if they don't offer it. Number two, I think there's a total lack of acknowledgement of some of the workers. Like we talk a lot about the founding of cities and businesses moving in and out and that type of stuff, but like there was unbelievable interesting movements here with unionization, with logging, with the Wobblies, with, I mean, there's been events, some just outside of Thurston County, like the Centralia Massacre, that are amazing history. And some of those events have happened within Thurston County, similar types of events to that. And I wonder, you know, our history books are notoriously bad on union history, covering that as a topic. And I wonder whether we could give some consideration to integrating some union related history.
Do you have, can you provide any resources that a person might use? Do you have a
Sure,
list or
absolutely.
some areas that you've read that would be helpful?
Yeah,
Save
absolutely.
time.
Yeah.
That would be great.
We attended the Nisqually River Council on Friday to talk about the comp plan update, Nisqually sub-area plan. And they have penciled us in for a much bigger conversation, probably around the summer when we get closer to having all the chapters done. And so we can add this to the list of like questions to ask, specifically around including that story. But it was their preference, at least at the Nisqually River Council, of course, is here by David Trout of the Nisqually tribe, to bring the comp plan before the whole council when it's more complete, let's say. So more to come on that, but just know that we are trying to figure out the best way to engage and get thoughtful feedback.
By the way, just one quick addition to that story about Chief Lesha. He was killed because he was accused of murdering someone. He was later exonerated, but that was many years later. It was just recently, I believe, in the last couple of years that he was actually pardoned for that. So that's also an important part of the history.
I have no idea if we have any appetite to mention it, but the person that the county is named after is not a great human. IMO, like his one defining political career move was very fervently defending exclusionary rules in the Oregon Territory, worrying that people of color would band together with indigenous folks and kick out the white folks, and just that's what we're named after. He has a one sentence mention on A4. Just some fun history.
So who's the founder of Puyallup?
I'll try.
Giant hops baron. Super famous for trying to make the Oregon Trail, like to restore it to greatness or whatever. He's a very famous story and was an unbelievably huge settler.
Meeker, was it?
What?
Was it Meeker?
Yeah, Ezra Meeker. Do you know if he's mentioned in here? I looked and didn't see.
He's
him.
not.
I know he didn't build this huge mansion here, although it was built just on an island very close to our county border. He certainly made a huge impact in Puyallup and a huge impact in other parts of the state, and even started big time in Vancouver, Washington. But I think he had some effect and impact here. Most notably, he started the US hops industry, and he got those hops from the Olympia Brewer Masters. They had imported them from Germany with them. They gave them to him, and he found that they grew unbelievably well in conditions here, and made a huge empire. I mean, he became so rich that he bought a Senate seat and, had a big impact and then went bankrupt because he had tried to get everyone else into hops farming, but he loaned them all the money to get started. And then there was like some crop disease that wiped out the crops for
They had a
everybody.
hops
and-
blight and they had to
Yeah.
move the hops production over to Yakima.
Exactly. So I would think something about Ezra Meeker might be.
Hey. We good? All right.
I just have one thing,
Okay.
on the history section. Do we maybe use a better word than occupation?
That's the kind of the standard word that's used these days for that. And we talk about Native American occupation. That's because the people who were occupying the territory, and then European occupation after that. So what would you suggest?
Settlement?
That
Or
might work.
just
That might
history?
work for the European settlement, but then we don't know about the settlement of the native people.
Just history then,
History, European history.
and Native American history.
Most native history recounts living in this area since time immemorial, so
Yeah.
using the term settled really doesn't work in that context.
We can use history. Cause I don't think it's Native American, I think that there's a connotation with the word occupation. And I don't think the Native Americans occupied this area.
Like a military occupation.
Yeah.
I see the different contexts, but if you say history, then it makes it seem like Native American history began and ended, and then European history started. That seems weird. Seems like it's disjointed.
I feel like there's a consistent word use makes sense. And I think what we're doing right now might not be perfect, but other words introduce new problems.
Does it need to be called out with subheads?
No.
I mean, I was just sort of looking at the subhead and I
don't think it needs to be broken apart.
It could be,
I mean, European
mean,
occupation.
by breaking it apart, it makes it sound like there are two distinct histories
Exactly.
versus it is
Two European-
all one history of Thurston County. And I don't know.
I agree.
I mean, you could call it pre-colonial.
No, but then it's them in reference to us.
Because there's no other subheads after that.
If it's the only ones where you can throughout, then it's inconsistent. It should probably.
Well, I mean, the subheads, yeah, in this particular appendix. So I don't know. I'll just.
You could use a before and after date.
I mean, you
mean,
can go before the founding of the county, which is 1852, and then after. If you wanted a historical date to split the, but
I didn't know BC stood for before colonialism.
ECD.
It seems like a short enough appendix that we could probably get away without figuring out subheads.
Maybe just have the heading Thurston County history and have it be
Yep.
one long narrative.
Yep.
Tell me how many pages?
I think that makes the most sense.
Don't move.
That's not.
You really want to take action?
Because, yeah, the way it's divided right now, it's 6 pages of European occupation before indigenous occupation with like a page and a half.
Well, we're hoping for more. And if I get some good resources, we can write our own, even if we don't get more. If you could email any resources to Tasha, that would be great.
All right, going once. Going twice. All right, it's that loss aversion that got everybody. Okay, I think we can move on.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Right, moving on to the industrial land study.
Sorry, can I say something at the start of this?
Sure.
I just want to state that I'm in full agreement with Betsy. That's your name?
Betsy Norton.
Betsy Norton, and the Black Hills Audubon Society's concerns about the lack of environmental impacts, habitat and climate change, considerations and water issues should be prominent in this.
Andrew Bond with Community Planning. Tonight's presentation is going to be a brief presentation on the industrial land study. We do have the resource available so that we can answer any questions if we start to go into specifics into the document. This started out with just a bit of a background for some of the new planning commissioners as to where this is coming from, an overview of the study, and some key takeaways from the study. So between 2018 to 2024, really, we've seen just an astronomical amount of rezoning requests for industrial. And in 2022, it really kind of boiled over, and the Planning Commission recommended to the board that the county conduct a study on industrial lands in the county, and just looking at the needs of the county based on the demand from the county, from the community. Later on, the board did docket and fund that proposal, and just this past December, the consultants Mal, Foster and Alongi completed their study of the county. The original proposal only, sorry.
Can you go back a slide? Yeah. Can you give us any context of how many or an unprecedented number?
So I would say in the last 5 years, we've had anywhere from 15 to 25 rezoning requests. Some didn't pencil, but we've had
Per year.
total, but we've had around 8 to 12 industrial requests throughout those times.
Representing over 1,000 acres easily. They haven't all been docketed, so they haven't all come before the planning commission, but in terms of citizen or applicant initiated requests, it's a lot.
Thank you.
And so when we went out for RFP, we asked that they take a look at both the UGAs and the rural county, but they went over, they expanded the scope because it was important to collect all the data for every aspect of Thurston County. So they looked at the cities, the UGAs and the rural county. And when they looked at the county, they looked at employment projections, the industrial space currently built, and just the recognize that noise, and the industrial lands inventory that's currently happening. The study looked at employment growth trends, and when we requested the consultants look at just scenarios of growth, they narrowed it down to manufacturing or transportation and warehouse distribution. Two distinct categories that they were able to then began forecasting potential needs for the county to meet, both through employment as well as land. And they did break it down when looking at the study at developed, underdeveloped, and developable areas. And so it's looking out to 2045, it's anticipated, yeah.
Can we go back again? Okay, when you talk about these two categories, they focused in on manufacturing and then transportation / warehouse. I mean, the first thing I think of when I think of industrial lands is warehouses. But warehouses are used for a broad range of things. Some of it's manufacturing, some of it's warehousing. But I mean, the large buildings are also used for many other purposes. If you go out to the ones out by Hawks Prairie, I mean, you've got everything from people running winery tasting rooms out of them to all sorts of other businesses that are not manufacturing. Would they then be included under that warehouse subset or not?
No, so I think that is that if they were looking at all the different industrial codes, the combination with transportation is really that warehouse distribution. So it's your large scale warehouse distribution facilities that require much larger parcels and access to the highway and things like that. And they really worked backwards from where they saw employment growth trends occurring across the state. And actually on the manufacturing side, Thurston County had one of the highest growth trends, not by a lot. And overall, we're not seeing a lot of growth in manufacturing as is, where warehouse distribution is definitely where it's at. You'll have to remember that there is there's no strategy that the board has, set forth in terms of what kind of industrial growth they'd like to see in the county. So we really just asked the consultant to okay, well, tell us the trends that you're seeing, work backwards from that, develop different scenarios so that the board could have those conversations or the community could have those conversations.
I'm not complaining. I know it's hard to get that data parsed down and everything, but just wanted to clarify.
I just wanted to make it clear that it wasn't like the board drove what those choices were. It was really sort of employment growth that drove those scenarios.
When they did this inventory, were they looking at were they making their determinations by zone or by use?
No, the industrial lands.
Questions? Okay. Moving on. So looking out to 2045, it's anticipated that we may need anywhere between 16 million to 23 million square feet of industrial space, totaling anywhere between 1,200 to 1,800 acres. And currently we have around 2.9 million square feet or 256 acres in the pipeline in some capacity through the permitting process.
And what's the square footage that exists right now?
Well, I'll just jump ahead. So we currently have 1,900 acres available, and I'll step back a little bit. And this slide is a lot of colors, a lot of different textures, but ultimately what it's showing is what is currently available to us today. The blue is going to be the net developable acres, and then the other different pieces are pieces that were removed from the total acreage, and that can be because of its public ownership, so the dump or another public facility. The critical areas, we removed aspects that just could not be developed on, so floodplain and other things like that. And they removed all the things that really kind of prohibited development from occurring on there. And that the blue number is kind of what was left. That's not to say they won't have hurdles, but it is the land that there is at least one option to move forward if they can overcome the hurdles of that. And so ending with that, we have around 1,900 acres. The majority of that acreage is within the cities. There's a little bit within the rural county, but it's mostly within the urban growth areas in the cities. And 1,100 of those acres are utility ready or need one primary utility. That was one of the key things they did look at within the study, was just all of the sites and what utilities were available near them. And because some of these larger distribution facilities require they need all the services, which sometimes can't be done in a rural area. They wanted to identify that, so it was very clear. And what their analysis did discover was that within the county, most of the acreage is for parcels that are 1 to 20 acres. And then just 96 acres from 20 to 39, and then there are no large scale parcels within the county. And so some of just the key takeaways, and the range is based on the different scenarios, but we will need anywhere from 1,200 to 1,800 acres, with obviously the 1900s available today. And 58% of the developable acreage is utility ready or just needs minimal utility investment. And most of the acreage is available in the smaller size parcels
At least out in the county.
in the county. That's my short and sweet on the industrial land study.
Sorry, can you put that last slide back on?
Just to make sure I'm understanding this, that need is not in excess of what is currently available. That is the need and this is what is available, right? Okay,
Yeah.
just make sure. So it is a safe discussion to say that there is currently enough available acreage to meet the need, the projected need.
I think what the study found is that it's a little bit more nuanced than that, depending on the county's economic development strategy or vision or whatever you want to call it. There might not be enough land of a particular size or with readily available access to utilities. So if you just look at acreage, that's not enough to necessarily tell you if you have land available for the type of economic development you might want to see.
So is there a lot of demand for 40+ acre?
That is where
That's
most of the demand is.
more than 2 million square feet.
So since I pulled up just some interesting tidbits, so we've been giving some presentations, to community groups, so we're trying to keep it very high level. And then, of course, we knew that you'd have lots of questions and hopefully lively conversation. So here's some other tidbits that I think are really interesting. So since the year 2000, there have been leaps in industrial building construction. Just since 2018, the county saw more than 6.4 million square feet constructed, with large distribution centers of 100,000 square feet or more comprising 88% of that square footage. So that's just in like the last 4 or 5 years, you have that much development happening.
And that's mostly happening inside the
Inside
incorporated areas.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference is access to utilities. So really the only place outside of our cities and urban growth areas where an industrial development will have access to utilities is Grand Mound.
So when I look at the preliminary docket and at the over 40 applications that come in, the only thing that shows up is Black Lake Quarry and Port of Tacoma site. Obviously the Port of Tacoma site's huge, which would really impact that. Are either of those included in any of those numbers yet?
No,
So even the
because they're
smaller,
proposed.
even the smaller lines like UP Castle and
None of them were considered. The only one that they actually had a special write-up for was the Black Lake Quarry UGA expansion,
okay,
because it was far enough along in the process and they had been in for pre-application. So they call it out as a potential area, but yeah, it's not reflected in like the total acreage because it hasn't been decided on yet.
Yeah.
Because Black Lake Quarry has 2.
and we don't have any idea where the docket's gonna end up yet this year, do we?
We don't, and
We're still a month away.
Beaver Creek is also another one,
How big is Beaver Creek?
400 acres.
That is a big one. Okay,
So that's a
yeah,
lot of proposals, and Beaver Creek, Port of Tacoma, UP Castle, Black Lake Court, those are all ones that are outside of UGAs that don't
Yeah.
have access to sewer and water.
Available countywide, did they exclude habitat for endangered species? Did they exclude agriculture? Did they exclude recreational lands?
They would, anything that's not zoned for industrial would get excluded. Habitat was interesting. Now with the HCP,
Right.
it's it's considered, but it's not treated like a critical area because there is a mechanism that the county's built in for developing those lands, at least if it's existing land. Now, if you're pulling new land in, our HCP might not have accounted for that much new, land to be developed in our debit credit system.
Okay, because when we talk about available countywide, I mean, some of your larger parcels are agriculture, which we've kind of want to set that aside and keep them agricultural. So how does that affect that 1,903 acres?
Those are considerations for any of those changes as they come before the
So
planning.
it would
commission, the board.
reduce the total number of acres available. If you excluded agriculture, habitat for endangered species, et cetera.
And there, you're thinking about things that are currently in agricultural use,
Right.
but in this study, they would be zoned for industrial, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that 1,900 acres does not necessarily exclude the use. So let's say that there's a parcel that currently has ag, but it's zoned for industrial. It would be reflected in that 1,900 acres,
Yeah.
but it's zoned for industrial. But I don't know if we have a lot of those. I mean, Beaver Creek historically had an ag use, but it's not prime farmland soils.
Yeah, now we went through that big discussion.
So you were talking about large farms and there's 0 acres and 40+ acre parcels.
Right. I'm thinking about the farm land out here off of, in the UGA, Lacey, or not Lacey.
Up a Yelm Highway.
Yeah,
The Spinner Farm?
Mhm.
Was it zoned industrial?
Are you talking about the,
The one.
isn't that one, it's gonna be a park that,
Or
yeah.
Yeah.
that-
That's why I asked if it was recreational was excluded.
All that
agricultural.
stuff was excluded, yes.
Can we spend a little time talking about employment and what types of employment and differences between quality of employment? And I mean, I'm just thinking specifically about Commissioner Hanson's comments to us about a year ago about his conversations with folks in Lewis County and how they had come to the conclusion that growing warehouses and warehouse jobs is not good for their local economy at all. Can you share again some of that story for the new commissioner?
Yeah, there was a couple of different people that commented, but Richard DeWalt was the one that told me directly.
Yeah.
That he, as the head of the Economic Alliance Lewis County, had no interest in adding warehouses to Lewis County or to the Centralia Chehalis area. In his opinion, they were full up because what they had seen is the warehouses come in and the warehouse jobs were not supporting families in the area. In fact, in many cases, the companies that owned the warehouses were recruiting people from out of state to come work in their warehouses. And the money they were earning was being sent back to southern states. They would live in a hotel in Tumwater for 6-8 months while they had their contract, and then they would go back to Alabama or Mississippi, is what he told me.
The study does include a whole section specifically on wages, which cites that they found transportation warehousing wages in Thurston County being 8,000 less than the overall county wages in 2015, and nearly 10,000 less than overall county wages in 2021, whereas county manufacturing wages were higher than overall wages in 2015. However, this was slightly reversed by 2021. So they did try to touch on at least some of those factors related to.
I have family members who work in some of these warehouses here in Thurston County, and it's miserable work and it's terrible pay, but pay is not the worst part. The pay is not the only component of the quality of the work. Scheduling is actually the #1 issue for people that work in these types of jobs, where they work ridiculous schedules, sometimes 20-hour shifts, sometimes 3 days in a row, and then they're off for 2 weeks and given very little workload or ability to make income on a consistent basis. If you all want to see a horribly depressing movie, check out Sorry We Missed You, a British movie about a package delivery of father of a family of four that signs up to be a gig worker for a package delivery company in England. And I mean, jobs and these gig worker type of setups and everything are designed to minimize the quality of work and quality of life and quality of pay that these workers receive, and to maximize profits in every possible way. And a job is not a job is not a job. There are very big differences between types of employment and types of jobs. And I think we need to, if we're doing anything related to economic planning and to industrial land development, we need to consider seriously what kinds of jobs we're attracting and helping create.
And I don't know if it's, you can attribute it, but I look at from what we looked at earlier, the state versus Thurston County median household income. Like for the first time in the graph, it dips below, like Thurston County dips below the state median income in 2015. I think that's really notable.
Are we attributing that dip in 2015 to the explosion of warehousing and industrial lands?
I said, I don't know if we can attribute it, but it's uncanny.
A very
Odd correlation.
possible correlation.
So when you said it's nuanced like this, we've got, here's the need, we've got enough available. How far out of whack do we think we are with the types of parcels and that availability to utilities? Like, does that make those 1,900 acres, like, how much does that decrement that number? Do we think? Best guesses, informed
Don't think
thoughts.
I don't think we have the technical skills to be able to say that is an optimal place to be in terms of utility readiness, especially because that number reflects the countywide number, so that'd be cities and UGAs, not necessarily just rural and incorporated. I do know that some of the policy recommendations that were referenced by Betsy and that are in the report speak to if the county wanted to take steps more actively to establish areas for economic development or manufacturing or warehouse distribution, that utilities was the area where they really were like utilities and somehow mitigating for critical areas. That's only if the county decides that they want to do that though.
And that could also be towards, like, it wouldn't be like new areas that you're pulling into industrial. It would be basically putting, incentivizing that to be developed via like utility expansion. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Not necessarily.
Both.
Sorry.
Oh, no. I mean, I think it's both. Like you've got Maytown, the Maytown exit already has existing industrial zoning, but those sites will always be underutilized if you don't have waters.
Mhm.
And that's existing without expanding it or anything. You just have sites that are probably gonna be storage, or something else that doesn't require sewer and water. So there's going beyond what's currently zoned. I'm sorry, Commissioner Hanson.
Well, I always think energy. And so utility expansion isn't the only answer because there are microgrids. And with the development of fuel cells that are superior to generators and solar and battery and all this, you could develop an industrial site that was largely self-contained.
I think that's true on the energy side. Is it true on the water
I-
and waste side?
I can't say that. It's really expensive to build your own treatment plant.
Yeah, and a lot of these
Really create a great
they
water
are
use I've seen, but not full
sitting
on.
on sensitive aquifer area. I mean, there are a lot of concerns with a lot of our existing industrial sites. I mean, I'm more familiar with the existing ones and the challenges that our developers face in trying to identify uses that sort of right size to water or, septic wells.
When we are looking at the total acres needed of 12 to 1,800 acres, is that broken down any by how large the sites need to be, because I guess what I'm getting at is if we don't have any 40+ acre sites, but that's all they really want, and we have 1 million, or we have 1,800 1-acre sites and nobody wants those anyways, then we really don't have acreage that is needed. Do we have any way to gauge, did this gauge the demand by parcel size?
I think it's probably somewhere in the very long report.
I think that's gonna be a huge portion of it.
It is, it's a matter of, is the question that the county can still ask is it appropriate to accommodate that out in rural areas? Or would it be more appropriate, rural or Grand Mound, or is it more appropriate to have that accommodated in city UGA? And so I think, this study is great because it provides data to all of the jurisdictions in Thurston County, not just us. And so, the presentations we've been asked to give, Thurston County Chamber, EDC, we're going to TRPC, and really presenting this as like, this is a body of data for all of us to use in the region, not just Thurston County. And I'm really happy that it got set up that way, because it's a question for the region, like where should these larger facilities be built?
There's a lot of discussion about the Grand Mound area because of its access to the interstate and the flat land and the quarry and all that stuff, but then there was also the aquifer issue. So, and that was the pushback for some of the zoning changes. I just available countywide, that's why I asked the question, how much of that is really available? And it doesn't sound like a whole hell of a lot.
Yeah, and I think we also should probably consider that on the jobs end, they might be lousy North County jobs, but they might be okay South County jobs. It might be terrible South County jobs too, for all I know.
Could you say more about what you mean by that?
Yeah.
Well,
If he lives
if
in
our
Clark County and he just noticed that Rainier's got a higher.
Higher median
Income by
income.
$20,000
The
a
city
year.
of Rainier does, and the city of Chino does, but a lot of the rural residents down there do not have the same income as people in the 3 big cities up north. They just,
They work in Chehalis and Centralia
they could.
or at the reservation.
So if we do, first of all, I should say, I'm not real big on county government subsidizing the development of infrastructure for other commercial entities. That I have a hard time with that right off the get-go. But if people wanna make more industrial lands and industrial businesses down in the South County, where the competition is the other warehouses in the Centralia area or South County area, or tribal employment, that might be decent jobs for them down there, more decent jobs for them than what's already available. And I guess sometimes there's something to be said that any job is better than no job.
Well, that sort of takes me back to Commissioner Pestinger's earlier comments. There are secondary effects with these warehouse uses that I don't know that we've even started to touch on. But what we saw, or rather what I saw, working in DuPont, and working right next to the Amazon warehouse there, is that was like the seed, right? And there was a sudden explosion once DuPont realized that was a revenue stream to build these warehouses and collect taxes on land that was sitting empty. They suddenly had a lot of warehouses pop up. The secondary effects were the transportation and the pollution, both noise and air, from the additional trucking that was going through there. And it created a whole movement within the citizens there that we don't need a train or a chain of 30 trucks between I-5 and the first stoplight that our kids are trying to get through to go to school.
Which is why they diverted Stellicum Road
Exactly.
and we did that, which is pain in the, never mind.
But jobs or no jobs, I think some of those effects are at least as significant as the job impacts.
Those warehouses burn out the local available working pool pretty quickly. So it's not really even an argument for county jobs like Kevin suggested there. After a while, they just start leaching from surrounding counties and then they'll start pulling folks from outside the state. I feel like some of the land that's very desirable right now is very desirable, so. I mean, if the UGAs are designed to help protect the character of these areas, why would we choose an inferior product to stick there if we can pick something better? I mean, I'm not saying all industrial use is bad. It sounds like particularly the manufacturing jobs pay well. They use smaller lots. They're easier to build in the area that's already zoned like that and adds more quality of life to the people in the county. So, you know.
If Lewis is in it.
Yeah, I know, I was just gonna say, yeah, and like the idea of, like you were saying, us subsidizing the development of something that might in the long term be a detriment to the county just seems silly to me.
We've been there before, you know, Upcastle came through the planning commission prior and we put forward a recommendation to not go forward with it. And one of the big reasons for that recommendation was subsidizing infrastructure for basically an expansion of the Port of Centralia. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to the planning commission at that time to do that. And I still feel that way, but I don't think that we should discount. I don't think we should remove wholesale the opportunity for jobs altogether. I'm not saying it doesn't deserve scrutiny, but I think that we need to consider those and look at that closely.
I was able to find, sorry, just the question about the available sites that are larger by jurisdiction. It's all in Appendix F. It's broken out by the size of the sites. And then it identifies where those sites are at that size and then whether they're utility ready or not. So in the category of 40 or more, it looks like there's about 330 acres that are available. Might only be, if I'm looking at the map correctly, it might only be 3 sites that comprise those 330 acres, all located within either Tumwater or Lacey. Nothing in UGAs, nothing in unincorporated. And those do look like, let's see here, they are utility ready. So, but if you want to sort of dive in, Appendix F.
So basically 8 40-acre parcels.
Or I mean, if there are only 3 sites, yeah, they might be a few large acres like together there. And it looks like Hawks Prairie and, you know, South Tumwater, the areas.
I agree. I think it's great that we are talking about and debating the, you know, differences of employment and jobs creation and that type of thing. I will say, like, when we talk about maybe they're okay jobs for South County, that just doesn't make sense to me if Lewis County, which has to have somewhat similar economic and job opportunities, is saying this is not good for our.
Yeah, I understood that from what Joel was saying.
There's an interesting point to be made that Lewis County is historically been an energy producer.
Yeah.
And it was like the coal mine and TransAlta, and that economic engine skewed incomes in the Centralia, Chehalis and surrounding areas for a long, long time, and most of that is going away. They're putting a lot of energy into the hydrogen hub idea and trying to replace those energy jobs. But they're not there right now the way that they once were.
Back to the environmental topics. So you've obviously heard from Black Hills Audubon and repeatedly maybe, and I can't tell, is it sort of too late to put that in there? They've already done this and all you're doing is just presenting what's already been created by the consultant and or is there any thought by the county, like maybe we should do something about considering some of those things?
So the study is complete, the contract is complete, and we don't have an additional funds to necessarily have them add in pieces. I think as a document that provides data to help inform decisions, it's solid in that it provides information that we didn't necessarily have before. Whereas we actually have good maps of our critical areas and we have, at least we have some information, you know,
Sorry.
documented. I was looking
The
at the
question
paper.
that one about information we already had before.
Well, I know, I
Didn't
mean,
the TRPC have a report that said we have more than enough available lands for warehouses?
the buildable lands report doesn't distinguish between industrial and commercial. And so it was difficult, because that was discussed during the Upcastle one, to distinguish like, so how does industrial fit into this? So that was really trying to look at that gap there. Which is why TRPC is really interested in the industrial land study, because they are hoping it will inform a lot of their like freight planning efforts, transportation planning efforts, things like that. Any land use decision that's gonna come before you, those things are gonna have to be taken into consideration. So any of those proposed comp plan amendments and rezones, they're gonna be required to do an environmental review, and all of that will be considered on that project. If the board decides to update the
You
economic,
mean all those environmental reviews that say no impact?
I don't know, Upcastle, we said determination of significance requiring an EIS, so I don't think we said no impact. I think we have a track record of requiring DSs on those. And that's why they didn't move forward. Because it didn't pencil for them to do a DS. So
Is that in
ground
play
review on
for
those.
Maytown?
I'm sorry,
Is that in play for Maytown?
if Maytown gets docketed, we don't have a SEPA checklist in front of us, but I can tell you what we did on Upcastle, and that was just a 20-acre rezone proposal. Was it 20 or
30.
30, sorry. The piece that's missing, I think, that we were hoping the industrial land study would inform was an update of the economic development chapter in the comp plan. Where, you could have had a broader discussion, a lot of things discussed tonight could potentially make their way into the comp plan. We don't have that scheduled right now.
Well, from what I remember of this, at least when the planning commission made the recommendation, our question was the amount of land that we have zoned and the need for more, and where is that? And then I think the environmental comes into the discussion when we decide, or when the board decides that we need to change some zoning. Because this is, and like I said, this is what I remember. And I don't know what if the board made any changes, but this was strictly what do we have, what do we need, and where do they meet? So, to me, that's what this is we're trying to figure out, because we had, I'm gonna say the first maybe 10 years I was on the planning commission, I don't think we had any of these requests. And then they started coming in. And another thing that I think prompted this was the Upcastle. They wanted us to change language in the code, which was going to make more land available to be rezoned. Because a lot of these, obviously anything that is already zoned, but people that come forward that are zoned RRR 1 to 5, you have to be, I don't remember the rules, but there was so close to a collector or interstate, or there was all these conditions you had to meet before you could even get onto the docket. And I think, I guess not onto the docket, because Upcastle wanted us to make those changes. And for me, that was the biggest problem with Upcastle, was we were gonna make changes with no idea of how that affected everything else. And so,
Wasn't there an element of like adjoining parcels could have automatically also been rezoned?
I think they were trying to change siting for warehouse distribution in the rural resource industrial zone. Right now, it can only be sited on an RRI zone parcel if it's within, half a mile of an interchange,
Rail
access to
connection.
rail. And so there are a number of the rezone applications that that are being considered for the docket that propose changes to RRI to relax those citing standards. To essentially open it up, you know, beyond the interchanges for warehouse distribution.
Sounds like lots of congestion.
One last thing on employment stuff, hasn't there been a lot of studies that have said that warehouses and delivery and even truck driving, semis, whatnot, that this is gonna be one of the next things to be automated, and that both the functions within the warehouse as well as the driving of vehicles with these packages is very likely to become automated.
The most modern warehouses that are being built right now are being built tall, not wide. They use a grid-based system, and almost all of the pick and pack, which is for small orders, which is what drives the majority of this big stuff. Think Amazon, you're buying one or two things of all this. Very little human involvement in those. They normally have an adjoining human and technology assisted area, but the cutting edge ones are not heavily peopled. But they have to be built generally to that standard. It's a different dimension than a normal warehouse. Converting them is a lot harder than building for it.
There's a lot of information in here. Could always be more, but there is information even about average amount of square footage per employee for these different uses. To try to get at that, you know, you build this large facility, how many jobs is it providing? You build this facility, how many jobs is it providing? But all of that is also in the study.
And I think I'll point out something else from personal experience, because I live right near the new Costco warehouse. And I can tell you, I'm shocked at how little it changed traffic. I mean, it's almost nothing. I would say the gas station that the pilot is produced more traffic in that area, or a bigger change in that area than the Costco. Now, there's another one right across the road, so when that one builds up and starts going, that's probably gonna make another, you know, it's a multiplier effect, but
So it's a warehouse or a distribution center?
I don't know what it is yet.
Oh,
No, the
the new one?
Costco.
I don't
The
know, the
Costco
Costco
is
is a distribution center.
Distributions.
But it has a gas station.
No, there's a gas station.
Separate.
So
okay,
Pilot
no.
put in, I don't remember, it must be about 10, 15 years ago. Pilot put in, and you know, for when they first went in, it's really quickly started to get bad to where the point where instead of getting off at 93rd, which is exit 99, there was days I'd just stay on the freeway and go down to Maytown and get off and drive home, backtrack, because you could get stuck stopped on the freeway because of the traffic. But they put a light in and that changed a lot. And then, but like I said, when the Costco came in, I was like, oh man, here we go, back to going to Maytown, get off the freeway because the traffic's gonna be so bad, and honestly, surprisingly, it hasn't been. Although I will say, like I said, I'm worried when the next place that it's already built, but there's really no action, you know, then it might get worse and worse and worse and worse.
I think traffic is obviously consideration when we're looking at environmental reviews for these large scale facilities. Obviously, stormwater, looking at you, Commissioner Day, is a factor that needs to be considered in environmental review. Because you're replacing a lot of permeable surface with impermeable surface, and where is that water going? Is it being treated?
And that may be part of that may be something that's driving the larger. Cause I would say that the stormwater pond at Costco is a couple acres. It is huge. But the ducks and geese seem to like it.
There's some giant infiltration basins too. Let's see, but the other thing I think about here, and especially from a county perspective, less on the warehouses, but more on the industrial is wastewater. Industrial, and
the trend I see on the horizon is more and more regulation of emerging contaminants. And that is gonna be, I think, a really tricky thing if the county has to start thinking about managing wastewater from industrial processes that they don't really have any control over. So.
That was my concern about the Swire Coca-Cola
Mhm.
bottling that the port deal with, in terms of any warehouse in Thurston County, that's been the most concerning thing, and that was mostly related to water.
Yeah, and industrial pretreatment requirements are pretty lax and really slow to move. So my favorite example is in the Snohomish Basin. There's a massive influx of PVDs. And there are some industrial laundry facilities that contribute water to the wastewater treatment plant and then cause super high spikes in the Snohomish. And the treatment plant doesn't have any way to manage them.
And in rural unincorporated, it would be on site.
Yep.
Not
Yeah.
necessarily going to a municipal treatment plant.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're gonna be kicking off following this docket is kind of a sit down with our public works department, our sort of leads over there. To look at any proposals that are placed on the docket and see like. Just what, if any, projects you have going on in these areas? What do you think challenges might be as they relate to, services like water, sewer, energy?
Are they updating the water, stormwater, manuals?
I think they just
They just did.
did it, yeah. Okay, what is the interval for the drainage manual updates?
It follows the ecology manual updates.
That's 7 years in?
I don't remember. off the top of my head.
Yeah,
And the manual doesn't always track the permit.
NPDES permit?
I believe it was just adopted last year.
Any other questions?
I guess just the key takeaway for me is, I've heard people reference the study and say, look, this is how much we need. We have more than that. That's great. We're done. But it's much more nuanced than that. And do we have the right types of properties for the types of industries we want to attract, and maybe the jobs we want to attract? And then there's also the question of almost all of these acreages are inside the cities or will someday be inside the cities when they're annexed. And where does that leave the county in terms of revenue? And being able to generate enough taxes to provide services to people that live in the unincorporated areas. I think those are all like pretty big considerations. If all of our industrial development happens inside the cities, where's the tax base for the county government? Moving forward, and that's something that needs to be considered.
That's why we had the discussion about Lacey. Incorporating the areas that generate a lot of money and not incorporating the areas that don't.
UGAs that have been around for decades. Yeah, and I think for me, the thing that I notice is this is gonna change the way I think about, when somebody comes in with a rezone request. Like, they're usually making a case that there's this massive demand for this parcel. And like, we need this one really badly, but being able to understand and ask questions about what is it about that parcel that's different from the other available land? I think would be pretty important.
Ownership, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Usually,
Yeah.
yeah.
and we now have a resource as staff to be able to answer a lot of those questions that we couldn't answer before. So I'm looking forward to be able to yes, we can look that up and we
Yeah.
can bring that back for you. Whereas before we didn't have access to that data.
And it doesn't scream to me that there should be a drastic change. It sounds like we're probably kind of in the ballpark for where we're zoned.
I think if we had county policies that focus this kind of development farther and farther into the incorporated areas, the more comfortable I'd feel.
Yeah, but just from an availability standpoint, it sounds like,
That's the way it is anyways, so.
yeah,
Yeah, so 500 of websites were in GAs, the rest, almost all of it was in cities, right?
Yeah, and Grand Mound is included in that, but of course, Grand Mound has its own, challenges. See,
I'm glad that study was done.
glad you all asked for it. As someone who really loves data, I was very appreciative to have this much more data available.
all right, ready to move on? Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, and we should think, so Andrew was the one who worked with the consultants over the course of the year, making sure that we got all of it.
Appreciate it.
the deliverables master.
Deliverables, yes.
All right, well, thank you again. And moving on, we have General Thurston 2045.
Yeah, we've held now both kickoffs with our team and the consultant, both kickoffs for climate and housing between our team and the consultant team, and trying to map out that outreach strategy, really trying to reach folks in South Thurston County. And our plan at this point is to kind of go for a Thursday, Saturday combo of like open house summits. Get people at different times, hopefully, down there in the Grand Mound Rochester area and the Yelm area, probably first or second week in June. So as soon as we have those dates, hopefully by the next meeting, I'll be able to share them. Really excited though. I'll just say that about what we've been hearing from the consultant team. Their grasp of these topic areas and being able to lead sort of the policy and planning for it. Especially on the climate resiliency stuff, like their ability to pull in data from a lot of different places. So yeah, I don't have a lot, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay. All right,
I guess I'm sorry, I do have a question.
okay.
I just recently used the Woodland Trail and the Western Chehalis Trail and into both parts of Lacey and parts of the county and parts of Olympia. I know other groups are heavily involved with that, but obviously the county has some role with parts of the trail that are in the county. There's been a lot of changes in the last few years that have dramatically changed the usage of those. Probably the thing that's most notable is electric vehicles that are now capable of going very, very fast. And an example of concern would be that bicycles or scooters or whatnot that are electric are able to use them. But there's criteria for class 1, or yeah, I think they're class 1, class 2, class 3 types of motors, and there's people openly using like combustion engines that are spewing fumes that are incredibly loud and going, 30 plus miles an hour down these trails. Is that something that's part of the transportation section of the comprehensive plan? Is that something that's in a totally different area where we would visit those types of questions and issues?
I would say that wouldn't live necessarily within the comprehensive plan. I would say that probably falls within the parks, general rules and policies, and
enforcement.
And enforcement may fall to the sheriff's department to enforce that. I don't know if they have any sort of park ranger system. But if not, it would be the sheriff who would be the regulatory enforcement.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, moving on to staff updates. Do you have any staff updates for us?
We have our senior planner position posted. This is the one that Brad Murphy held He had a salmon focus and a background as a wetland biologist. We are changing it up a little bit. We have other folks on the team that are gonna take over some of those salmon duties, and we're orienting that senior planner position to focus more on engagement, strategic planning, sort of partnership building, think grants, grants to do big projects. And so they'd probably be leading our education and outreach folks as well as some of our policy people. So I'm sharing that with you so that you can share that with your networks. But yeah, we're excited to bring someone on board. Oh,
Have you
and
gotten any applications yet?
well, the deadline is until Monday, so I don't expect much until Monday. I think we've got 3 or 4 already. When you get to the senior planner level, you don't get quite as many, but we're hoping for a good pool of applicants.
Are any of them external? Are they all internal, or can you say?
I don't know. I wait for Jeremy to tell me, and he won't tell me until it's closed.
enough,
He
fair
just gives
enough.
me teasers. I think, you know, we've got great internal applicants. I've also been sharing it very broadly with, you know, planning directors at the other cities and on LinkedIn and Facebook, so always open. The new county manager starts April 1st, so that is ahead of our next meeting. And
There's an opening for him on the 5th of April.
I was just gonna say, yep, thank you, you can share.
No, they're gonna have a meet and greet with him on the 5th of April.
Yep, I think it's is it 4 to 6:30?
Yeah.
There are things up all over, but I can't remember the time. And I have seen him popping in on a few of the briefings, so you might see him before April 1st. But yeah, encourage you. I'll be gone spring break. But if you all are around and want to meet him, good opportunity, and I'm sure he'll show up at some point. We always invite them to come to a planning commission meeting.
I would say the one last thing is the docket, comment very close. And so we had a very well utilized survey, and so we had around 1,300 comments from like the 14th to the 17th of March. And so it's 14th of February to the 17th of March. And so we're in the midst of compiling them to provide them to the board for their briefing on Monday.
He's got a whole production shop going on.
I have docket brain right now.
The docket
so-
brain, but it's amazing. So we employed a new tool. Hopefully more transparent, easier to use, definitely easier for us to compile. The turnaround time is pretty heroic, Herculean, because nominate period close, we have to have all the materials ready and to the commissioner's office basically tomorrow. So compiling all of that into nice little packets that are public friendly. We also are pulling in all the comments back to the 2020 docket. That's when we kind of instituted sort of collecting everything. So think thousands of pages.
For the land use and rezone amendments.
For the land use and rezone amendments.
Are these 1,300 comments, is that like a 25% increase over last year, 100% or like 10 times?
Last year we had like 200 to 300 comments, so it's quite substantial.
Yeah, and there was, I think there was a year
Six-fold
with
that.
Port Tacoma, there
2020.
was a concerted effort. And so that one I think was 700
Yeah,
or
it was
something, but
700.
Okay.
it's a lot.
Driven by specific issues.
Yeah, and
You seen real themes yet?
Themes, so what's nice is in the past, our comment form was a single form. And then we had to actually read the comments to categorize them. Now it's pretty much like you choose your project and you comment on that specifically. Bar Holdings was the winner and the most comments. Almost, I think, 700 comments on that one. With a wide range of topics, concerns, feelings, everything you can think of. And so those are all gonna be provided to them in a giant packet, as well as all their past comments, so get a full perspective.
What is Bar Holdings again?
Bar Holdings is the land use and rezone amendment project that also involves the state's newest law that allows a UGA swap.
It's a project proposed at Highway 99 and 93rd Avenue.
So, water.
near the barn nursery.
We can build storage units.
Warehouses.
It's,
Land development.
it's a, housing, a YMCA, grocery store, some of the things.
Yeah, it's a,
they get it
like a
for-
mixed use development. I think they're referring to it as Salish Landing now. When it was submitted, it was Bar Holdings. So
What landing?
Salish Landing. One of the things that SurveyMonkey provides, and we'll see if it's helpful to the board, is a sentiment analysis, just sort of taking 700 comments and trying to figure out like, what is that range there? I mean, it's just illustrative, but it's, at least gives some insight into,
Is that with the emoticons?
yes.
I've been surprised at how good some of those analytics are.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the comments are all there for them to flip through, but at a glance, I mean, when you have that many, and then we're also providing summaries of all the nonprofit and government comments, sort of at a high level, so they don't have to go dig into them. I, huge kudos to Andrew and his team, because it's a big lift. We didn't expect to get so many and then have to package them in like 3 days.
Do you think that your larger response is because of the format that you used?
I would say so. I think we definitely followed our normal practice for noticing, but we did expand it a little bit. We did more like in atrium type notifications. I know there were multiple groups that sent out blasts to their specific groups. And then I think just having its own distinct page really did help, because in the past, the two different dockets lived separate from each other. And there wasn't really a kind of a uniform place. And so what we did is we actually just consolidated them both. And this page will be 100% docket when we're doing the docket. And then when the docket is done, this is where you will find the list of projects. And I think that did help. I mean, if Google Analytics is anything, that if you search comp plan docket, it was nowhere to be found. And now it is like the first project, first link on the page. So.
The dedicated page got way better indexed.
So we'll see, and we'll continue tweaking. I mean, we tried to make it's like every year you make a certain level of improvements and then we'll build on this next year.
All right, well, thank you.
Actually, do you have the link handy for that senior planner position?
I do. Yes.
If you have any really good runner-up candidates, we should talk.
No.
Runner-up candidates.
We might have future position. Of course. As long as you do the same.
Deal.
Stealing from each other for the next 5 years.
We gotta work together, otherwise we'll just steal from each other. So, all right, moving on to calendaring with agenda items. We talked about the April 3rd meeting last time. But we have an April 17th that we talked about earlier coming up. And are folks gonna be available for April 17th? How does that look for?
I will probably not.
Okay.
I would be out of state.
Anybody else have problems with the 17th? Right, I think we will carry on without you.
So actually, I might not be here. Might be summit.
All right. Moving on, is there anything for the good of the order? Commissioner Pessinger.
So just as a quick update, the committee that was working on recommendations for rules of procedure, I was supposed to redline, get a copy of a Word version, and Ashley was kind enough to get me a Word version of our rules of procedure to redline. I haven't had time to do it yet. However, Ashley and staff jointly, I think, did some redlining of ideas they had for potential improvements, some of which are probably very similar to ones we were thinking of and discussing. So thank you for that. And let's look forward to the next one.
All right. Any other good of the order?
I got one. For anybody that's interested, we're doing our annual spring calf tours on the farm, March 30th and April 13th from 10 to 1. So it's there's other stuff there, like my neighbor has goats, so she'll bring her goats so you can get in and pet them. The calf tour is basically put a bunch of people on a wagon and we just drive out and drive around all the calves.
What were the dates again, please?
March 30th and April 13th.
How many cows are there?
There's, I didn't bring my book. I think there's currently 17 calves. So, actually, no, we had one yesterday, so have 17 tagged. I think there's 18.
That's cool.
Did you have something, Bill?
I might have two.
Okay,
Well, I have two. One might be appropriate or not. You all can let me know. what those were.
we'll gavel you
The
down.
First one is that Timberland Regional Library is hosting free drop-in services and support from the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project at the main library on April 12th from 2 to 4:30 p.m. And then more personally close to me, the Hispanic Roundtable is having, for folks that are interested in the Latino Youth Summit and supporting that, I would ask people to reach out to me. We're going to have an informational meeting in the upcoming, very near upcoming future. Just trying to get some of our planning folks together. So if you or someone you know might be interested in helping plan that, it's the help that we're looking for. And it will be equal Latin. I just don't remember the date. I didn't see it in my email right away.
It's like 3 doors down, right?
It's right, it's like across the street. We can walk right out of here. and go- I don't-
And Miriam, you're engaged with her,
Yeah.
right? I've seen a few emails go back
Yeah,
and forth.
yeah.
Okay, she was really excited about that.
Yep, I've given her name to our outreach person already, so hopefully she's on the list.
And speaking of outreach, we might have, we're making the list of all the outreach events that we'd like to get to this year. If you're open to it, it might be nice to see if planning commissioners could go to some of them. I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to cover all of them. But it'd be great if we
Can
can
you
have.
talk about putting some on here?
Yes, we didn't have any coming up, but yeah, I mean, I think this is sort of even going beyond that is like could we give you materials to share?
Give me a tablet, I'll do surveys.
Yeah, we have tablets for surveys, so we can chat more about that. Miriam was just like, there's a lot I want to make it to, and like one of them conflicts because it's Prairie Appreciation Days, and that's kind of an all hands on deck for the education outreach team, so.
Do you have a list that you could share with us, or have you already?
We're developing it, and
Okay.
maybe next meeting we could come with that list and see if there are any that you're already planning to attend.
Awesome.
I have one, the new executive director at the Port of Olympia started this week. Today was her 3rd day. And there is a town hall being hosted by the Port of Olympia for the community to meet her on the 27th of March from 5:30 to 6:30, I believe, at the, I think it's called the Personal Room. It's the port offices downtown where the commission meetings happen.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go to the order. All right. Having no other business, this meeting is adjourned.